Chapter 5 Before the Turning Point. Drake, Julia said. Yeah? How are you? Well, seeing as I just witnessed the 37th death of my mother, 22nd of Maya, 27th of Haru, and not to mention countless of everyone else, have been better. 3 months had passed, believe it or not. 3 horrifying months, and every day was a blast, seeing as every day I saw someone I care about die. Some older scenarios kept returning too, like the one where Haru was chasing the man with the raincoat. I still never saw the man's face. I had asked Haru about it, but he said he couldn't remember a thing. The unusual thing about this was that I still had yet to live through seeing the deaths of Julia and Dora. This dark spirit, this monster I couldn't find or defeat, was close to breaking me. Bring it! I kept screaming. Where are you? They've been waiting in line for 3 months already. Bring it on. I can take it. But I remained strong. The months were filled with nightmares, illusions, and several attacks of the people I care about. Whether those were part of illusions or real, I didn't know, but I could never risk it. I had to keep them safe. Although not everything was bad, the winter basically never came. It was cold, and sometimes it snowed, but we really had the worst of it behind us. Spring had started. I normally loved that season. I wondered how much the spirit was gonna make me hate it. Come on, Drake, let's get some fresh air, Julia proposed. And then, we'll find something. It troubled Julia, how lifeless I was. She kept trying to keep me from giving up. She wanted me to come along on a ride. We walked outside and headed for Arian, Safara, and Hank. I kept finding it difficult to trust Arian, even though I knew he would never harm me on purpose. After we mounted them, we lifted off. We only started descending as we reached the mountains. Haru thought he did something extremely cool when he jumped off of Hank's back while still meters up in the air, and when he landed safely by controlling the air. If only he knew what crazy things I'd done so far during all the times I was running for my life the last few months. As everyone landed, we sat and stared at the sunrise. It was nice, remaining under a blue sky, not freezing anymore, and not having to think about anything for a moment. After several hours had passed and Haru and Maya had already gone back, we decided to head back as well. As we rose up and were about to remount, something caught us off guard. After my head started hurting again, I was surprised about how we didn't hear it coming, but glad I managed to block it in time. A beam of fire came at us from a far distance. As I tried to stop it, I told Julia to go. Go, quickly! I was glad to see Julia trusted me. She mounted Safara and headed to the palace without looking back. In a way, it confused me. I knew her, and I knew she would help to fight whatever I was dealing with. As I kept trying to hold back the flames, they were blocking my vision. I couldn't see what was creating them. While I was occupied, I saw ash devils appear and go after Julia. Arian, go help them! But right as I said that, a fireball hit Safara and she went up in flames. Julia was snatched by one of Mordora's followers, riding an ash devil. She screamed as she witnessed Safara die. Her wings incinerated and she crashed against the side of the mountain. She broke her neck and did not survive the fall. I stopped looking over my shoulder when the fire finally vanquished. Arian had gone to fight against the creature that created them. It was Tyro. I couldn't believe it. I thought Arian had defeated him. I even remembered seeing his body at the bottom of the ravine after the battle, but it did explain why his skeleton was nowhere to be found, back when I found myself at the bottom of the ravine. While Arian and Tyro were fighting, I watched as Julia was being taken away. The 2 dragons kept going higher until I couldn't see them anymore, but right before I could go after Julia, Arian was falling from the sky. I could see he was hurt, and the landing could hurt him even worse. I had to act quickly. I pushed Arian away with a strong wind force and made sure he would land in the ocean for a softer landing. I'm sorry, buddy. I had to make a decision. If I went after Julia, Arian would die. Trusting Julia to be safe, I chose to save Arian by taking on Tyro. I grabbed several pieces of rock from the top of the mountain and took them with me as I blasted myself off the ground. I enclosed myself in stone armor and used airbending to deliver several blows. I used firebending to move through the air by releasing pressure from my feet. I could continuously deliver painful blows to Tyro without him being able to attack back. Eventually, I blew Tyro towards the ground. The impact took a toll on him. As I went for a skydive and combined air and fire in order to make an explosion, right as my stone feet clashed against Tyro's body, the blow killed him immediately. It had been a few years, but I was the only one who'd gotten stronger. With no remorse, I walked away. First, I leaned over the edge of the mountain and looked down to where Safara crashed, but she wasn't there. I went to the other side to look for Arian, but I couldn't see him. I had to make a decision on whether to look for Arian or to go save Julia. The pressure released by the flames I emitted from my hands and feet made me able to fly, or well, boost myself. In an incredibly fast pace, I headed for Mordor's castle. I prayed Arian was alright. In the distance, I saw the followers land and take Julia inside. I soon landed in front of the big doors, but right as I wanted to open them, I realized something. I took a few steps back and looked up. I couldn't believe my eyes, but Mordor's castle was back, untouched, like nothing I did to it ever really happened. I was furious. What exactly was an illusion and what was not? I couldn't risk it, so I stormed inside the castle. As I blew the doors open with a blast of air, I froze when dozens of followers were pointing their weapons at me. I couldn't go anywhere. Julia was tied up and that only fueled my anger more. She seemed terrified. "What do you want?" I asked, already aware of the answer. One of the followers stepped forward. I expected the man to be their leader at that time, but before he could speak, the headache returned. My view became blurry and I became unable to remain upright, and I fell on my knees. "Don't move," the leader spoke. The headache had never hurt that bad. Something new was happening. It didn't feel like an illusion, but then again it might have been. As the headache finally went away, I felt an unstoppable rage. Alpha, why are his eyes red?" I heard one of them say. I felt like anger took the better of me. After they killed Sapphira, possibly Arian, took Julia, tied her up like that, and after seeing her in such distress, I couldn't hold back my anger. "What do you want?" I asked again. I could hear my own voice, which sounded deeper than ever. It was almost like a different person took over. But all those months of suffering didn't make it a surprise. I was sick of it all. But despite the anger, I had no idea what to do. I had to know whether or not it was an illusion. I looked for details and quickly found something unusual. Julia wasn't wearing her necklace. She always wore her necklace. I turned around and headed for the door, ignoring any danger. "Wait, stop. If you leave, she dies." "Kill away," I said emotionlessly. "Wait!" "Drake, please." Julia begged for me to save her. "Save me." I didn't listen. I just kept on walking. "She'll come back again and again and again anyway," I said to myself. Julia's screaming and begging hurt me. I was so close to giving in. What if it were all real? What confused me is that no one went after me. They could have killed me, something they always had wanted to do. Julia couldn't stop crying and screaming, and even though I wasn't like her, I couldn't bear it. That's where I released my anger. I felt an urge to do something terrible. I could hear the sounds of sparks and electricity, and I opened a whole new page in the Book of Elements. I remember seeing sparks of electricity circling around my body, and as I made a run for it, I felt faster than ever. With inhumane speed, I went from follower to follower, killing each and every one of them. While I used to think every life was worth saving, I couldn't care less anymore. They had the person I loved. I started with the man who was holding a knife to Julia's throat, following with every other follower. In mere seconds, all who were left was their leader. He looked at me with a face full of fear and disbelief. He couldn't move at first, but knew he had to. He took quick steps towards the door and exited, but my rage hadn't cooled down yet. I turned around and aimed at the weaponry at the walls. I made them come off and pierce the men, one by one. If I think back on it now, it was a horrible thing to do. And what I saw was gruesome, but I didn't care at the time. They all paid for the things that were happening to me. Julia looked at me, but she was still scared. I soon realized it was for a different reason. I looked behind me at the men, impaled by spears and swords, and it reminded me of something. That could have been me, a long time back. I bet Julia saw Mordor in me. I had cooled down again once we got outside. Before we left, I turned around once more. "Hold on." I repeated the process from before and destroyed the castle again. I hated that place. That day, I could release all of my anger, hatred, sadness, and worries onto a dark part of my past. I might have done horrible things that day, but then I didn't know what or who did those other horrible things to me. Our journey back led us through the forest. We'd almost made it out and were about a kilometer away from the place. "Is Sapphira?" "No. Before I came after you, I couldn't see her. The spirit might be playing tricks on both our minds. I doubt she really is gone." "Your doubt always cost me my life." I ignored it, looked at her, and asked what I was meaning to ask. "Where's your necklace?" Oh, guess I've got it back at the palace." I didn't believe it. There had never been a day on which she didn't wear it. "So what exactly has been an illusion and what hasn't been one?" "I honestly have no clue. Maybe we aren't actually here. Maybe we never even looked for CK and Mom is still alive. Maybe we never found the mythical world. Maybe we never even met and you're just an illusion. I'm real, don't worry. I smiled, even though it was a fake one. I couldn't trust her yet. I am afraid there comes a time we have to accept that some people are truly gone. Yeah, well, I can't exactly do that, seeing as everyone keeps coming back. And in your heart, you don't sense that they're still there? I don't feel a thing. It slightly confused me when Julia smiled, but she quickly showed me she felt sorry. I wondered if she really did. Do we have any idea how he does it? Julia asked. He? Might be a she. Haha, doubtful. What's that supposed to mean? Some things are just obvious. I can't believe you haven't figured it out yourself. Do you know something? No. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So close. This couldn't be right. Say, remember when we used to play hide and seek all the time during primary school? I asked her. Yeah? Why? There it was. He messed up. Yes, he. I knew Julia wasn't acting like her normal self, and now I knew for sure it wasn't her to begin with. Julia and I met in high school and never went to primary school together. Whatever illusions the spirit was creating, they weren't as credible when it was I who knew the exact details. I now knew it was a he because Julia was acting like she was so sure that it was a he, as if she knew. And she didn't. He did. But the spirit realized he screwed up in an instant as well, so before he could harm me, I made a run for it. The fact that Julia's pupils weren't red put me off. Normally, the pupils of the ones he took over changed into a red color, even though he tried to confuse me by sometimes hiding it during the illusions. The fact that he was capable of almost perfectly mimicking someone I knew as well as Julia was unbelievable. I ran for my life, unsure of what the spirit would do to me. I had never been through a scene like that. I eventually made it to the plains and could see the palace in the distance. I was lucky to see my friends outside, probably out waiting for me to return. I wondered what would happen if Julia saw a copy of herself, but it never came to that. The spirit stopped at the edge of the forest, smiled evilly, and waved at me before they vanished. My friends came to me and they were clearly worried. What took you so long? Where's Arian? Julia asked. Quick, what was real? Did I go with you to the mountains? Yeah, that was this morning. What happened after? You said you'd be right behind us as we decided to head back. I never said... Drake? He's taunting me. He? Yeah. The spirit? Yeah, don't ask. Is everything alright? Maya asked. I'm fine. Stay close to me. He's not done with me yet. I expected the spirit to hurt my friends at any time or create another one of his ghastly illusions. I wondered who he'd tackle this time. Haru? Maya? But it wasn't until I heard Julia starting to groan I knew I wasn't ready for what was coming. Oh no. As Julia fell on the grass, I feared the worst. Julia, look at me. Fight it. I wasn't sure why, but all didn't feel like a game anymore. I really feared that I'd lose her for good. But anything I tried, it didn't work. When the pain went away and she opened her eyes, she wasn't Julia anymore. Her pupils were bloodshot. Her hand reached for the grass beside her and I knew what she was about to do. I took a few steps back, but then I saw something I never expected to see. Behind my friends hovered the silhouette of a person. It was merely a collection of wrinkling heat waves, but I knew it had to be him, the dark spirit. But I didn't have any time to focus on it. During the seconds that I was distracted, Julia had demolished an unbelievably big part of the forest and was moving the roots, wood, leaves, and even trees through the ground, grass, and air. My leg was grabbed by one of the roots and I feared for what was to come. I was dragged along, being hurled around and smashed against the ground. Julia, what are you doing? Haru asked. He wanted to help, but right as he took his first step, both Haru and Maya were pinned down by the roots. I managed to free myself by burning the root down. But what Julia was capable of, while controlled by the spirit, was unimaginable. Entire trees and their roots moved through the ground like it was water, and everything she did was to harm me. I had to free her. As I tried to run to her, I was prevented from doing so because of trees I had to dodge, roots I couldn't get close to, and leaves blocking my vision. I kept dodging, slicing the trees and roots apart by using airbending and burning down anything else in my path. I kept getting closer and closer, but right before I managed to reach her, I was grabbed. A root managed to get a hold of my leg, followed by another grabbing my other leg, followed by both my arms. My body was being torn apart. Julia, what are you doing? Maya shouted. Julia, it's me, stop! I screamed. I was in such pain. I screamed as loud as I could, hoping Julia would snap out of it, but nothing seemed to work. Every time I overheated myself and burned down one of the roots, new ones took their place. I couldn't take it any longer. I tried to focus on a way to get stronger, to overheat more. I knew if I could channel my anger into power, I could get away. So I thought of the spirit, what he was doing. I tried to think of my friends, and as I saw them like that, I couldn't help but get angry. I channeled all the pain, all the anger into power and released a massive heat wave, burning everything around me into cinders. I landed and tried to catch a breath. It really took a heavy toll on me. I was glad Julia managed to protect herself from a heat wave with just the right amount of trees, as that way she protected Harold and Maya as well, who were still stuck to the ground behind her. I was out of breath and out of strength. With this regards, I started running towards the spirit's silhouette and hoped my fireball would make him go up in flames. He didn't and remained unharmed. No wonder. The dark spirit raised what looked like an arm and started forming a spherical force of dark particles. I took a few steps back. I suddenly felt someone grab my arm, and I noticed it was Julia. I was glad to see she was back to her senses, and Harold and Maya were freed as well. She seemed really tired and could barely stand. Help! We all stared at the silhouette, while the ball of darkness kept growing. Once it didn't seem to grow bigger anymore, the spirit moved towards us. I embraced Julia and hoped I could protect her. Julia and I soon found ourselves in a raging dome of darkness that tried everything it could to get us apart. But I kept holding on to her with all my strength. I heard horrible sounds. People were screaming, crying, in pain, agony. It truly was pure darkness. I waited. My eyes were closed, but I could still feel Julia in my arms. After a while, it finally got quiet and I opened my eyes. Julia? I didn't get a reply. I suddenly noticed the land around us was filled with cracks, ravines even. It was bad, as water from the ocean filled the ravines and even flooded the land. It was as if Dragonia's entire landscape was reshaped and possibly at the brink of sinking. Another thing that worried me was Julia. She wasn't moving and I was too afraid to let go of her. Julia? Still no reply. Please. But to my regret, it seemed like Julia was gone for good. She didn't move. I couldn't feel her heart beating nor hear her breathing. Everything was falling apart. I didn't know what to do anymore. They all wanted me to keep going, but I wasn't sure if I still could. In fact, this was the turning point. After this, I lost everything. I heard the spirit chuckle. I couldn't believe someone or something could possibly take pride in what was happening, although it wasn't long until I did. How pitiful. And I knew who the dark spirit was.